Here is the making of our rendezvous, our blind date with destiny. This is the place which we have not been able to mention in our letters home as we waited, as we massed our strength and our striking power until the time was the right time. John Higgins, Harry Stein, Tom Guthrie, Luigi Barzini. Different kinds of names, but kind of not different. John Higgins, American. Harry Stein, American. Tom Guthrie, American. Luigi Barzini, American. That's me, Luigi Barzini. We're all wondering the same thing. What's it going to be like, this Italy? Some of the fellas been asking me, hey, Luigi, what's it like? You were born here. I don't know what to tell them. I was just a kid when my father took us to America. All I remember are some of the places I visited with him. All I know is what I remember my father telling me about the old country. What I remember hearing the old-timers tell. And even while remembering the things of the past, I'm aware of the present, of the things I will want to remember about now. Because for us, this is the big push. And all the jumbled impressions are rushing into my consciousness. The details that make up the overall image of the single word, attack. So it all registers in my brain as we plow through the water, the way the boats look, the calm resolution of our leaders, the steady progress toward our destination. Some of us have done this lots of times before, in practice. Others are veterans. But now for all of us is for keeps, a real show by a director who knows his business. Already our task force is moving up. We're crowded into landing barges, ships and men and tanks. All the deadly mechanization of modern warfare moving up against the homeland of my people, the land where I was born. The big guns blasted aside the curtain of my memory. Funny how in a few minutes your whole life can unwind like a roll of film, and you'll live over again the whole story, the past along with the present. With my first glimpse of the coast of Italy, I thought back to the places I'd known or heard of as a kid. Names like Rome, Naples, Amalfi, Venice, or Milan. Familiar names, yet strange. Like relatives you've never met, but you've heard about. This one's rich, this one's pretty, that one's talented. They're all there. I can see them in my mind just as they were described. Even the tales are clear. The wide, embracing sweep of the Bay of Naples and the hills beyond forming the rock-bound coast. I remember stories about Sardinia, about the docks at Palermo where my father and I used to watch the strange native troops brought in from Tripoli, former savages that had been trained in Sicily. They were a colorful sight in their bright uniforms and their pet monkey mascots climbing about their shoulders. I recall the quaint streets filled with animation and busy shopkeepers. Among other things I remember seeing were the women of the working classes passing by in the crowded streets carrying heavy loads on their heads. How the peasants from the country would come all rigged out in typical Sardinian costume with their peculiar, curious hats. To my young eyes, it was a wonderland, a fantastic world that blended the old and the new. Modern pavements and noisy tram cars, and not far away, ancient country lanes, barefooted children playing everywhere. Top-heavy sheep ambling down the narrow, crooked streets. But all was peaceful and quiet. Thoughts come to me of the age-old village of Albrabella, the cone-shaped roofs of the stone houses built by these descendants of people who lived there in the Stone Age. All they have to do is gather the countless stones to construct a house of any size. I can see them just as they were described to me, spinning and weaving their own cloth with hand looms made centuries ago. Everything they wore, homemade. From the carding of the wool to the finished product. The know-how passed on from the old to the young. Each peasant was an expert craftsman, an artist. Love and a keen eye for beauty went into the weaving of these simple homespun materials. How reverently the old-timers back home used to speak of Florence. Tired old eyes grew bright with memories of the loggia of the Lancers. Everywhere works of art collected through the centuries. No city in the world possesses such a magnificent wealth of art treasures. Here, everything betrays the work of generation after generation of ingenious and gifted men. Painting, sculpture, the magnificent palaces and the cathedrals, all immortal monuments of beauty, reminiscences of a history which has for centuries influenced the whole of Europe. I remembered the majestic beauty of the famous cathedral at Siena. Its beautifully sculptured figures, the works of the great artists of the Renaissance. The great cathedrals of Italy are masterpieces of architectural design built to inspire glory and reverence. And the imposing arcade in Milan, another architectural gem. And the great Milan Cathedral with its more than 2,000 statues. Work on it was begun over 100 years before Columbus discovered America. Easily one of the world's most beautiful buildings. I've never forgotten it. Well, I know Venice when I see it. Who wouldn't recognize it? The historic Grand Canal, the gondolas as typical of this unique city as the numerous bridges which span the canals of this jewel of the Adriatic. This bridge was built in 1588 by Antonio da Ponte, one of the most painted bridges in the world. Another place I loved as a boy was the famous St. Mark's Piazza. Here I used to come on warm days and feed the pigeons. And my father, as a young artist, came often to study the Byzantine architecture of the cathedral with its overwhelming golden mosaic work. Here Shakespeare set the scene for his Merchant of Venice, the famed Rialto. Rows of ancient shops still line both sides of the canal, just as they did in the days of the Doges. Gondolas still float on the waters of the canal. But the new and the modern has its place in Venice, too. For the ancient and the modern have been bound together by a new highway bringing the automobile to the city of canals. Trains and automobiles, and the latest word in streetcars. Most of all, I remember the stories about the famous Venetian glass. The stories of the men who developed glass blowing since the Middle Ages into an art for which they proudly gave their lives, knowing that the work would eventually injure the lungs. Yet living up to their heritage as great craftsmen. Names like Salviati, I remember, and Vanini. Families dedicated to the creation of masterpieces in glass to thrill the world. The art of glass blowing was brought to the Venetian lagoons by people seeking a safe refuge from the incursions of the Huns. Little-known things like that come to my mind, and well-known things, too, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And from the top of the tower, I remember sometimes at sunset, looking out over the town toward the sea, I think of the pictures I saw of the Leaning Tower and how my father described the delicate bronze artwork on the cathedral and the bells. The tower contains 7 bells, the heaviest weighing 6 tons. The hand-worked bronze panels of the door tell the story of the life of Jesus. 20 years of reverent labor went into their creation. One of the most astounding works of art in all of Italy, and certainly one of the most beautiful. And finally, I think of Rome. What tales of wonder I have heard. I think I know its every street and suburb, like Tivoli, where the Roman emperors and the important people of Caesar's time used to live. And the ruins of their ancient palaces amid the pines of Rome still show the beauty of architecture of that early time. In my mind's eye, I often look down at the impressive sight of the Piazza del Popolo, as seen from the heights of the Pincian Hills. It's wonderful to think of the history that's been written there, of the famous men and women who have walked there. I remember the feeling of anticipation as I drew closer, holding tightly to my father's hand. I hear again his patient voice relating the centuries-old history of the famous Castel St. Angelo, going back to the time of Adrian. Once a prison and a fortress, an unforgettable structure. I think of St. Peter's, the largest church in the world, forming the entrance to the Vatican City, wearing statues like a crown. Its beauty evokes the spirit of the time when it was first built, and it seems hard to realize that we're living in the 20th century. The Piazza is St. Pietro with its stately columns, each one a more beautiful work of art than the other. Wherever one turns, there is beauty. Beauty immortalized in stone and bronze. Everywhere in Rome there are fountains. In the parks, on the broad avenues, in the loggias of the great public buildings. Fountains that beguile the eye and enchant the ear with their cascading waters. Wherever you look, a masterpiece. Here a fountain, there a piece of sculpture, and there a painting. Raphael's famous painting on the ceiling of the famous loggia. Everywhere you turn is great art. for in Italy, every building and every church is an art gallery. I remember stories of the Vatican City with every entrance guarded by Swiss volunteers dedicating themselves to protect the life of the Pope and the Vatican's treasures. For within the walls of the Vatican is a storehouse of art never before equaled in the world. I remember how thrilled I was when my father took me to see the ceremony of the changing of the guards. And I remember other stories that my father used to tell of a man in the spiritual city of Rome who thought he was a god, Benito Mussolini, who built around himself a legend of superiority, which he tried to plant in the minds and in the very bodies of his country's people and their children, twisting, distorting young minds to build a war machine. But when these children grow up, they won't be fooled by shouted fascist threats. They will have seen what Mussolini and his gangsters have done to Italy. A man who clothed himself in the mantle of a Superman, puffing himself up until he burst and was deflated to his natural size. A peacock without his feathers, flying away on the wings of another bird we shall soon pluck. There'll be no monuments to him in Rome among the many beautiful memorials I remember seeing there when I was a kid, like the one erected in memory of Victor Emmanuel II, or the other statues on the Victor Emmanuel Memorial, situated at the terminus of the Corso in the very heart of Rome. So I think of all the glory and grandeur that was Rome centuries ago, still standing as a picturesque reminder of the past. The Villa d'Este, with its ancient garden still preserved. The fountains still playing as they did at the time when the Cardinal lived there. Respighi, the great composer, once wrote a famous piece of music, The Fountains of Rome, but no more of a masterpiece than the works of art that inspired him. I think of the fountains of Rome with a warmer attachment than anything else. They stand out in my childhood's memory, the love of sculpture planted within me by my father as he lovingly pointed out each detail, and myself fascinated by the play and sound of the rippling waters of these beautiful stone creations. All these many impressions come back to me of a people and a country and a past that contributed to the classics. No history of Italy can be written that does not echo every Italian's inherent native love of beauty. It is as much a part of his rich heritage as the very language he speaks, as the beauty of the worn stones of the Colosseum. I think with irony of these pockmarked, crumbling rooms which took centuries to destroy. And I realize how much they resemble the cultural work of a Nazi time bomb which takes 5 minutes to do the same damage. These monuments to a historic past, standing for centuries, gone in one swift second as the ruthless hands of Nazi vandals released their instruments of destruction. But now I know what it is like, this Italy, the picturesque hills converted into Nazi fortresses. The works of art, the treasures, looted and plundered. The people numbed by years of regimentation under the dictatorship of fascist phonies. No sacrilege is too great for these inhuman monsters. Churches where for generations my people have knelt to worship, destroyed in one flash of a Nazi bomb. But these vandals will be run out. Already new hope burns again in Italian hearts, and smiles light the faces of many who never thought to smile again. Italy will be freed. Through weakened, hunger-ridden bodies, an electric surge of a released enthusiasm, the reawakening of their right to think, to return to dignity. Italy will be free again. In the streets, the people crowd around their deliverers. The pain-racked face of an Italian peasant woman who has lost 2 sons lights up with the ghost of a smile. Italy will be free again. A Yank holds a baby in his arms, a baby that will grow up now without fear. Food for the hungry. Yes, these are the children of the gay, warm-hearted, beauty-loving people that are my ancestors. The running barefoot children, now pitiful, emaciated, foraging for a scrap of food. This is a pitiful reminder of the land of fountains. The bubbling play of water, now a preciously doled-out pailful. It will take another generation to shake off the threat of this shadow, to recapture the soul of Italy and make it quicken in the bodies and minds of its people. Another generation to rebuild the wreckage of great buildings and human lives, to bring back beauty and health to a broken nation and a weary people. This was fascist Italy, but Italy is free again. Scenes like this will soon be no more. The hated symbols of fascism will have vanished from the streets of Rome. Yes, the things my father described so reverently I can still see in my mind. I see the great cathedrals rebuilt and restored. Even more important, I see a people saved to live again, like people. I see myself making this possible for the whole world so that I may live at peace with my neighbors. That's why we're here in Italy. John Higgins, Harry Stein, Tom Guthrie, Luigi Barzini. Americans.